Assalamu alaikum. Unmute.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you got
Salam
me.
alaikum. There
Alaikum
we are.
salam, sir. How are you? Good
Alhamdulillah.
day,
I'm
good
fine,
day,
brother.
good day.
Good to see you again. Yes, it
Always a
is.
pleasure. Always a
Yes.
pleasure. One of the
Yes,
mercies of
likewise.
Allah is being with you on Monday mornings.
Alhamdulillah. Likewise, I'm so pleased to have this opportunity to speak with you again. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Brother, may it please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to join us. Oh, spinning round in my head as usual. Spinning round in my head as usual. Specifically, today, I would like to tap your heart and your mind to try and clarify a few ideas I've been wrestling with, and we've all been wrestling with these from time to time, especially as Americans. You see, we got this problem with liberty, don't we? And you see, I'm not sure if it was Thomas Paine or Thomas Jefferson who wrote the preamble, the Constitution. I'm sure there were several hands in that mix. And they were all white, as we know, and they were all, for the most part, European, and they all had their own bias going into this thing. And they did a pretty good job, but my own research shows that there were hidden hands and hidden agendas also in the orientation and in the words that were used. And there's one phrase in particular that sticks in my craw that says all men are created equal. Well, that's not true. It can't possibly be true. We're equal before God in the eyes of God as far as justice is concerned, but we're certainly not all equal as far as characteristics, talents, mentality, intellectual abilities, all that sort of thing. Now, you can take a child in any group of children and start to train them up, and they'll all sort of stand together in on an even keel until maybe the ages of 3 or 4, and then you'll see certain differentiations taken place and develop, and the children will certainly show different aptitudes. And I think this variety is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. This variety in mankind is also their nature and everything. There's a variety of everything. But this idea of equality doesn't stand well with my concept of divine order. You see, I mean, we certainly can't equate ourselves with God, and we have this ability to certain extent to how shall I say, express godly attributions, but we all do not do that equally, and we all do not develop at an equal pace. And there's many, many reasons for that: psychologically nurturing and intellectual abilities that adapt themselves to educational processes and practice. Some people get exposed to something and then they work at it, you see, and then they become very good at it. Well, why does that happen with some people and not with others? Others are sort of, I don't know, lazy. You see, I know lots of lazy folks. I get a bit lazy myself. But in any case, I want to explore this idea of equality with respect to nonetics and Al Quran and the concepts that are contained therein. But let me just expand this a little bit before I hand you the floor, dear brother, because this morning, you see, I'm sitting there at prayer on my porch. I sit. It's not that I don't mind doing bowing down and doing the rokia, and I mean not the rokia, the rakyat and all that sort of thing. But now I sit because I'm a bit crippled. And as I was sitting this morning reciting Al Quran and praying, making my dua, some days, the cat comes and sits in my lap while I'm doing that, and other days, the dog doesn't sit in my lap, but puts his head in my lap. And this morning I was thinking about, oh gosh, a couple of things with respect to this and equality and whatnot. I said, well, there's a dog with his head in my lap while I'm praying. And there's something very, very natural about that. And there are brothers and sisters out there who would condemn me for allowing the dog to violate my sacred space, you see. But I think the dog has enhanced it, because I felt enhanced by the dog's presence. And I thought, well, that's a very, very kindly thing on the part of the dog to join me. I feel the same thing when a child crawls into my arms while I'm praying. It happens on occasion, not all the time. But in any case, I was thinking about this, and then I was thinking about what you said about the differentiation between the higher cortex and the lower brain, the midbrain, and all that sort of thing. And we've got this sort of differentiation between us. It allows us to discern the divine order with respect to ourselves and the animal kingdom. Animals are capable of doing lots of things that we can't do, but they are not capable of the intellectual activities that we have. I mean, they certainly do more than we give them credit for. I mean, there are tigers and lions and elephants who remember their benefactors for years and pay them homage.
Yes.
I mean, this is documented fact.
Yeah.
And so that's a sort of degree of cortical activity, if you will, but it's not the same degree that we share as human beings, brother to brother, sister to sister, and so I'm thinking about that, and I'm saying, well, my gosh, this dog has something in common with me, and here I am reciting the Quran and making my dua, and I'm wondering how the dog does this. And the dog is joining me, you see, while I do it. And that spoke to me in that moment. It spoke a whole lot. I mean, my whole heart just kind of reached out into the universe at that moment. And I kind of felt like a caliph, with the dog in my lap. Oh my God, that's an awful thing to say in if you regard the ears of some of our listeners who considered that a kind of a blasphemy, you will, but I don't consider that at all. It's the same thing, you see, brother. If I go up to Canada, I sit with one of the remnants of the Iroquois tribes up there, and we're out in the forest, and we're at a campfire, and one of the old men is reciting some of the narrative of his life story, and he gets all excited and wants to thank the Great Spirit for something that happened to him 20 years ago, and he jumps up and he starts dancing around that fire. Well, I'm liable to get up and start dancing around the fire with him, you see, and and if I can't do it, I'll do it in spirit, if not in body. But that's a prayer. That's a zakat. That's an act of worship, you see. And so I don't want to limit my Islamic experience, my Muslim experience, to just what has been prescribed to me by other people. And most of these other people I've never met. I don't have any relationship with them. So I'm kind of using my higher cortex there to think about these things and
Great.
rationalize the behaviors that I find I'm comfortable with, you see, with respect to my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is not on an equal par in the minds of some people who would condemn me for what I'm saying, or condemn me for actually feeling this experience and reveling in it, you see. So I'm sure that there's something in Nunetics that would address this, you see, and this idea, well, we're not all equal and we don't all think equally. We don't all develop equally. We don't all approach Allah equally. I mean, the prophets prove that, and so do some of the saintly figures we know. And there are on record, without doubt, uh, miracles that occur in the lives of different people, prophet, saint, it doesn't make any difference. And there are people who never experience anything that they consider to be divine intervention in their lives. And I kind of feel sad for these people, not pity sad, but just, it's kind of like just saying, well, gosh, they mixed something, they missed something in their relationship with the divine. And I think this idea of the priesthood is a great cause for that. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, you see, is because the people who would not like to hear about me sitting and praying with the dog in my lap um, would disapprove of that. And this sort of thing, and this disapproval in a religious sense, is a form of tyranny, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm trying to bring us full circle to liberty, you see, with this converse. I may not be as clear as I should be or could be, but I think I'm getting the message across, brother. You see, if somebody tells me that I got to pray in such and such a way, and that this is the only way I'm going to please God, and I know that they're lying, because I know that's not the fact. I know that I've already pleased God. And I know that, you see. This is a conscious thing of knowing. I have this certainty, and I had this certainty for quite some time now. It wasn't really confirmed by anything in my life, except that I just know it. I feel it. These things happen to me. And then last year, I read a book by a fellow named Jelani, who was a Sufi who lived about 800 years ago,
familiar.
Revelations of the Unseen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reading this book, and I'm going through it, and I'm halfway through the book, and I say, my God, he's talking about me. I've already experienced these things.
Mm-hmm.
What he says that God did with him, God's already done with me. And I saw this all the way through the book. I said, my God, I've done that. I've done that. God's done this. I said, my God, what is this? You see? Now, here's a Sufi who's, went out into the desert for 25 years and disappeared and then came back. Who knows what he did while he was out there? I don't think anybody knows. God knows. We don't. And anybody who thinks they do, they're probably just speculating. That's what the Freemasons do. They speculate, you see. So we all speculate, but I'm reading this guy's book, and I'm sure, he did everything, prayed 5 times a day and did the whole fasting business and whatever he thought was right. Well, I've done the same thing, but I haven't prayed 5 times a day. I haven't done all these things, and yet God dealt with me the same way he dealt with this guy. Now, the reason is because, hey, this is a reality, and we're sharing this conversation right now, and I'm being as honest and as frank and open as I possibly can, because
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I'm getting a lot out of it.
Yeah, you see, because we're surrounded by tyrants. We got tyrants in the government, in the deep state, who think they know better than us. And we got brothers and sisters out there who claim Islam, and they think they know better than us too. And so I'm thinking, hey, what they're doing, what the deep state's doing, and what our sisters are doing, has a lot in common with communism, you see. And this kind of tyranny, well, you can call it fascism, it doesn't matter. You got a central bank, central government, you got an elite class, and they're all getting rich while you're, struggling to obey them. So, and pay the taxes, this sort of thing. You pay your zakat, and now it goes as a kind of a tax to the priesthood. Oh gosh, I'm stepping on some toes here today now,
Listen,
aren't I, brother?
these toes need to be
Uh,
stepped on. I do
yeah,
it all the time. I love
these toes,
it.
these are toes that need to be stepped on. And one of the reasons I'm stepping on them is I get students asking me these questions. I've just had some fresh inquiries today, and before and after my experience with my good dog. I have two dogs, by the way. They both put their heads in my lap when I'm praying sometimes. Um, and I'm wrestling with this idea. I'm saying, okay, well, we got this idea. We're not equal. I'm not equal with the dog. The dog's not equal with me. I'm not equal with the deep state people. I'm not equal with my brothers who know more than me. I'm not equal with the brain surgeon. We're not equal. Okay. We're all at different stages in our development and our path, our journey, our path into the Samawat, as we turn to our beloved Creator, as we return to Him. So, my question, dear brothers, how do we reconcile these struggles that we have with tyranny, both politically and religiously? And how do we reconcile that with clarification through nunetics? Now,
Great
I know
question.
that's a loaded
There's a
question.
lot to unpack.
No, that's enough. But
But
I'm sure.
you're talking to a professional unpacker though.
Oh, okay, I
I
got you.
unpack bags for a living.
There you go. Okay, yeah.
All right.
Then, and with the blessings of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, hand the floor over to you, hand the mic over to you, and may it please Allah Subhanahu wa Taala to grant us some clarification of these issues.
Inshallah. Yes. Thank you so much for that. Unfolding of of the potential that Allah has actually clocked into each and every one of us.
Mm.
You began talking about freedom, what's in the preambles to the Constitution.
Mm.
You mentioned the word liberty before you mentioned the word freedom,
Mm.
although they are not synonymous.
No, they're not.
All right. Now, let's unpack this nunetically, meaning by studying the use of words that are hidden within words.
Mm.
Within the word liberty is the prefix lib. Everybody knows we talk about women's lib, that kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah.
But lib is a word that is from the Arabic word lub, L-U-B-B. And lub represents the heart.
Mm.
It is the heart's ability to pump blood preferentially up to the brain and then distribute it throughout the rest of the body, all the way down to your pinky toe, and then back.
Mm.
That's what lub does. In fact, they say that the ancient Arabs would listen to the sound of the blood flowing out of the heart. Their physicians would listen to that sound, and they are the ones who heard it as representing that sound, lub, lub, lub. Probably know the standard word for the heart in the Quran. Standard word for the heart in the Quran is qalb, the core of anything. The centralized core of anything. The centralized core of anything. That's why we have a book called the Quran.
Yes. Okay.
Because
gotcha.
it's the core of the human life.
Yes.
So
gotcha.
liberty has to do with the regulation of your sensitivities, the regulation of your compassion, the regulation of love and charity, and how those things are dispersed in the same way that the heart is able to pump blood first up to the brain because the intellect needs the help the most. Most of the world is in trouble because of the mismanagement of the intellect, not the heart. You can be as sweet as you want to be and be dumb as a rock.
Yes. Yes.
So the heart's concern as a primary concern is going to be to make sure that the intellect gets its due. And it's the intellect that once it becomes ignited, then it's able to see all of the other needs, the necessary things that should be done. And then the intellect begins to put together a rational plan for the distribution of those goods. That's how you know when the intellect is working in full form. The word freedom actually comes from the term freedom.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be the freedom of the mind to
Mm-hmm.
explore, to engage, to
Mm-hmm.
ask questions,
Mm-hmm.
to solve riddles and problems.
Mm-hmm.
The mind has been conditioned like that from birth. The child is looking and has nothing but question marks. The newborn baby has no statements to make.
Mm-hmm.
She only has question marks. And you'll even notice that the English question mark is in the shape of the profile of the ear. See?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I'm all ears, is what the infant is saying, because I'm here to learn. I'm a tape recorder for at
Mm-hmm.
least the next 7 years. I'm just taking in and recording, taking in and recording. Whatever I do, I'm just giving you back what I've recorded from your world.
Mm-hmm.
This is why the child remains innocent up until the seventh year.
Yes.
Now we're differentiating what liberty is as the ability to express what is in the human heart and in the human soul, and what freedom is, which is the ability to explore intellectually. And that exploration can even go into areas that are dark areas. The intellect, as a free dome, can explore Satanism,
Mm-hmm.
masonry, all of that
Of course.
that has unmentionable kinds of schemes and plots and plans and evil things that can be done. There are good things that are done also, but there's a lot of dark areas in these ideologies and philosophies. But it's the freedom that's doing that. Now let me go
Yes.
back to the idea of the equality that you mentioned.
Mm.
Now, all men are created equal. It's already a misogynistic statement, of course, and women have complained about it for years. So what do you mean all
Yes, of course.
men are created?
Mm.
And it's because we're not understanding the derivations of these English words. We're not
Yes.
understanding that we're really in two different worlds, the old world of America and the world versus where we are now and how we understand language. So when
Mm-hmm.
they said man and men back then, it was not a reference necessarily to males. Now you might say, well,
Mm-hmm.
that's not true because the white man was the de facto ruler, and what he said goes, and he was over his woman, he was abusing and oppressing his woman. Yes, indeed. But
Yes,
that's
he
true.
was.
That's true for the majority of ignorant people.
Yes. Yes.
But there, as you know, there's always a certain select group of elites who don't
Mm-hmm.
register meanings for words like most of us have been taught to do.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, the man who I look up to as far as his scholarship, as you know, is Imam Wadathuddin Muhammad. And in 1975, he was the first one that I heard give a cogent meaning for the word man. He said, man has nothing to do with your biology as a male,
Mm-hmm.
and it has everything to do with your psychology as a mind. So he said,
Mm-hmm.
man means mind. And that's why the word
Mm-hmm.
man is also a part of the word woman, because she is also an equal mind.
Mm-hmm.
Her mind should be equally liberated to think, to
Mm-hmm.
explore. In the Quran, Allah has two words for it. One is dhakr, that's the word for man as a thinker. And then Allah follows it with dhakarat, which is the same word for thinker, but given a feminine twist. So
Mm-hmm.
there's the thinking men and the thinking women,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in the Quran, Allah expresses these two, um, we might want to call them polar opposites, but they're really not opposites. They are complementary twos, or zawj, the
Yes.
Quran calls them. They're
Yes.
not
The
opposites.
opposite.
Yeah.
Opposite. Yeah. Yeah.
Opposite. Yeah, there we go. Let's
Yeah.
go back
All
to that
right.
lesson. Right. All of the faculties and all of the talents and all of the acumen that the next person has. And all of the talents and all of the acumen that the next person has. But what it
Mm-hmm.
does mean in the minds of those elite people who put this language together, who were deep, deep, deep into the study of the nuances of scriptural language.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes into the Greek language, that goes into the study of the Hebrew language, that goes into their
Mm-hmm.
study of the Arabic language, Indo-European languages, Sanskrit language. These are people who were astute on that level, and they spent most of their day studying the nuances of codes in language.
Mm-hmm.
So equal doesn't mean that I'm born uh, a genius necessarily.
Yes.
It only means that I am born with a potential for genius. Now, let me explain the
Yes.
difference. I'm
Okay.
going to explain the
Mm-hmm.
difference. And I believe that this is what they meant by equal.
Mm-hmm.
We begin as a unicell,
Yes.
and then that unicell splits
Mm-hmm.
become two cell,
Yes.
and then that unicell splits
Mm-hmm.
become two, and then from there, and the Quran has the same message, min nafsin wahida, created from one soul, and then from that soul its mate, and then from them scattered men and women far and wide. So it gives the same biological picture that
Yes.
that is given in science and in biology.
Mm.
Now, that one cell, that is our initial creation thing in the body, because
Yes.
because
Yes.
that cell is exactly all of these trillions of cells that we occupy as adult bodies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Every single one of those trillions of cells began as that one cell, and they all have the same possibility to become anything in the body.
Yes,
There are
called
cells.
pluripotent.
Yeah.
Pluripotent.
Okay. Yeah. Give us that technical language. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. What we're talking about. So it doesn't mean. So it doesn't mean that the cells that became your hair follicles to the cells that became your teeth, or your bloodstream. It only means that within the potential, within the capability of that cell was the possibility, because it contained the same substance. Now, what makes for the differentiation? Allah's decree. Know why it differentiates into becoming, your toenail, and the other one gets into becoming, your toenail, and the other one becomes your pubic hair, and the other one becomes your eyebrow, and your
they're trying to figure that out, but they won't be able to.
They won't be able to figure it out without the Quran as an assistant in that effort.
That's correct. Yeah.
Now, so equal, again, does not mean that everyone comes here with all of the same opportunities and all of the same abilities. No, because a person can be born with one arm. Some people are born with three arms, three legs. I've seen pictures of people with three legs, born with three legs. But it doesn't mean that they're not equal in the sense that this language is speaking to on the higher level. So equal on the higher level is speaking to a phenomenon that is addressing the potential in the mind, in the man created equal. All men are created with equal possibilities. So it's left to the individual to themselves explore what those possibilities are. You have to be put in an environment that can tap that and awaken that in you.
Yes.
Talking about the possibilities. So one person grows up to be a so-called bum, and the next person grows up to be an intellectual and all of that. But within the genes of each of those people was placed the genius. And Allah is the master of the production of genius. And you have seen people who have been taken out of an environment. This is the nature versus nurture argument. People have been taken out of a particular environment that was oppressive to the intellect and even oppressive to their sensitivity. They were afraid to even feel for people because of how they were treated, how they were abused. Take them out of that, especially children at a younger age. Take those children out of that home, out of that oppressive and abusive environment, put them in a loving and nurturing environment. That child begins to just, wow, right? Like unfold like a flower. So that's what's meant by equal. It doesn't mean equal in terms of your wealth or in terms of even your health and things like that. It's just talking about an innate possibility within the genes themselves. Now, one other statement, and then I'd like to really hear more from you on this topic. Let's go to what the Quran says about being equal.
Sure.
In the creation of what is called the Khalifa, and that's a debated word all of the way across the world of Muslim scholarship.
Yes.
The average person doesn't think about the word Khalifa. They just read, Allah created a Khalifa in the earth or on the earth. And, Allah says, when I breathe into him of my spirit, then bow down and make sajda. That's a strange phrase.
Yes.
For Allah to make. He said, when I create the Khalifa, then I want all of you, and all of you included his malaik or his angels.
Yes.
And he was also addressing Iblis. He said,
Yes.
make sajda in the direction of, not to.
Mm-hmm.
See, there's a difference between in the direction of
Mm-hmm.
and the word to in Arabic.
Yes. Yes.
To doesn't mean that you own them
Mm-hmm.
or that it owns you. It
Yes,
just means that
exactly.
you've been set out on a particular course towards whatever sajda is. And
Mm-hmm.
sajda is just submission.
Mm-hmm.
It's the definitive way of submitting to guidance that has come to you from on high, from Allah.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. That's what sajda is. That's why Allah says that the trees and the clouds and the animals and the great number among humans, they make sajda. The trees make sajda? Where's their forehead? Where's their sujood mark?
Mm-hmm.
The
Yes,
mountains
yes.
make sajda. How in the animals make sajda? How in the world? I mean, I can see a giraffe every now and then, bowing its neck down and nibbling from the ground. What is that? It's not sajda like we know sajda. So it's not talking about it. It just means that they have clocked within their genes, within their
Mm-hmm.
cellular structure, commands and information that keeps them in their particular form, the
Yes.
form that Allah created them with. So that's what Allah wants for the human being too. He created
Mm-hmm.
the human being to operate based on a particular platform of excellence, human excellence. Most humans are not there
Yes, of
because
course.
most humans don't pay attention to the signals and the instructing signs called ayat. Allah says that He has put ayat in the skies and put ayat in the earth. And He says, and
Mm-hmm.
also in you, He created similar ayat. He says, but most people pay it no mind whatsoever. So we're oblivious, and therefore we can never come into the level of human freedom that Allah intended for us.
Yes.
We can only advance ourselves upon measures of liberty, because liberty is really just the allowance that your heart makes for you to go in that direction, for you to stop going in the other direction that's not good for you. Your heart is regulating that on the most part until you come into better sense, but most people never come into that better sense. Now, the word for equal in the Quran is siwa, and it's given in the term uswa. Those are related terms. There's
Mm-hmm.
siwa, where Allah says that the people should come together upon the principle of siwa.
Mm.
Also says about Muhammad the prophet, and also about Ibrahim the prophet, that they have uswa. It's called
Mm-hmm.
uswatun hasana. Called
Mm-hmm.
uswatun hasana. Foundational uswa or sense of balance and equilibrium. That's what it means.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's and Allah also says about that Khalifa, which is why I mentioned the Khalifa to begin with, that some angel lip, I call it. Some angel lip, I call it. Giving Allah some angel lip. When
Yes.
Allah said, okay, when I create the Khalifa, I want you all to obey the Khalifa. And some among the angels said, well,
Mm-hmm.
and then Allah, he stuck this into the conversation. He said, well, and then Allah, he stuck this into the conversation. He said, well, he said, when I have breathed into him, nafakatu, when I have breathed into him of my ruh,
Mm-hmm.
of my, they translated spirit, it's much more than spirit.
Yes.
But
Yes.
when I have breathed into this new creation of my ruh, he said, then make sajda in his direction. You see the difference?
Mm.
And he says, when I have fashioned him, this is the statement in the Quran, Suwaituhu, from the same root as uswa, from the same root as siwa. When I have suwaituhum, him, meaning when I have given him an innate sense of equilibrium or equality, but not, like I said, equality in terms of politics and economics and that, but equality in terms of the ability in that human nature to be productive and to come out of the problems that they will face with the victory, to come out of the problems with the victory, because the victory is already clocked into your nature, how to do it with the
Mm-hmm.
assistance of Allah. That's why you have to begin Bismillah. You can't begin with Bismi Freud,
Yes. Right.
or Bismi Young. Yeah, you can't
No,
you
no,
can't
no,
begin with
no, no,
those guys, because
no.
to begin with them is to begin off the course from the beginning, because they
Mm-hmm.
didn't start in the fitrah, they started in the pocketbook.
Yes,
And
of
they
course.
started with the governmental approvals and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Freud was funded by uh, the deep state.
Oh,
Let's say
absolutely.
it that way.
Well, it's a
Okay.
fact. It's a fact.
Yes, of
We can talk
course.
about
Yeah.
that. That's the fact. Anybody who has achieved that level of exposure, chances are that if they were not directly funded by the deep state, they were indirectly funded by the deep state. And
Yes.
some of them might not have even known that's where the funding was coming from. There are
That
entertainers, recording
that
artists,
also happens.
movie
Yes.
stars who are
Mhm.
deep, deep, deep into the pockets of the deep state
And they
elite.
don't know it.
They have no idea, but the Quran
Yeah.
do. So Allah put all of that information in the Quran. Allah tells you about them in the Quran.
Yes.
So this equality, just going back to that, it's from that word siwa and the word uswa and the two key consonants. Now we're getting to numetics. The two key consonants are the S and the W. Siwa, uswa. I can do this in 2 minutes about what those two letters mean. About what those two letters mean. The letter
Please.
S, which is seen, transliterated SEEN. The letter seen is a reference to the human intellect. Word seen is from the verb sana, and sana has to do with the brilliance of the teeth when taken care of, the brilliance of the teeth, how the teeth can shine. So Muslims, you'll see Muslims with the miswak and they trying to get the particles from between, and all of that. But the word sana gave us the English word sun, S-U-N, because of its brilliance. Okay. It gave us the word sheen. You see how this goes, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because when things that can be polished are tended to appropriately, then it brings about a brilliance. And isn't that what we say about our children, whose education becomes polished?
Yes.
Whose knowledge about a subject becomes polished?
Yes.
So it's a symbol of the human intellect. So now we're talking about what the equality is Quranically speaking. Equality has to do with the polishing of your human intellect, not just because you were born, you're equal, but you have the equal potential if you tend to the serious business of polishing your acumen. So that's the first thing. What does the wa in siwa mean, or sin wow? The wow is the W. Wa is, so if I say myself and Dr. O, that and right there in the middle of myself and Dr. O is the word wa. Dr.
Okay.
O, wa, Benjamin Bilal, right? Okay.
Yes.
So it connects. It
See
connects.
to what?
Now, here we go.
There we go.
Yeah, it's the connector to all of the possibilities that become open to you for an extended amount of time. See, wa is an extender. It extends the sentence. I'm going to the store, and when I get to the store, I'm going to buy this and that and the other. So and is extending. That's what wa does. It extends. So siwa, that's the proper pronunciation. There's a little what they call hamza at the end of it, which cuts the breath. It cuts the breath, meaning that this is not forever. So the intellect is being extended. The things that you are coming up with, intellectually speaking, the inventions that you're involved in and the books that you're writing and all of that, just like you and I are authors of many books.
Yes.
And we put those books online and we sell those books because we're trying to extend the knowledge that Allah has deposited within our intellects.
Yes.
So that's but there's going to be a time when we're no longer here, we're no longer writing, we're senile or whatever, dead, or whatever happens is going to happen.
Yes.
So Hamza cuts the breath, and when the breath is cut, the life is over. So what is Allah saying? Don't get all egotistical about your intellect's possibilities. You are not me. Allah said, you are not me. I live forever. I know it all. Don't think that about yourself. You have a limited capacity. Your equality is based on limitations. Because although your one cell can produce everything in your body, at the same time, it can't do that. And it hasn't done that. The possibilities are there, but the opportunities are not there to be everything at one time. So the intellect has been charged with specifying things, specificity. honing in, separating out what it's not necessary, what's not necessary for the moment, and only focusing on those things that are pertinent to the moment. That was the
Yes.
original design for the intellect. The word intellect is a verb as well as a noun. And as a
Mm-hmm.
verb, intellect means internal election, to elect things inside, what your mind is
Yes.
doing.
Yes.
It's
Mm-hmm.
choosing things, and it's choosing things based on what is most relevant, what is
Mm-hmm.
most useful, as Allah would say in the Quran, what is most useful knowledge. Allah calls it ilm,
Mm-hmm.
useful knowledge, right? So that knowledge which is for playtime, that knowledge which is just for you and your wife and and your children just futzing around a little bit and playing and
Mm-hmm.
slapping each other in the back of the head. That's you
Mm-hmm.
know how to do that, but that's not useful
Yes.
knowledge for society.
Yes.
So it's not a part of your uswa. What's part of
Mm-hmm.
your uswa is only that knowledge which brings about equilibrium.
Mm-hmm.
It's that knowledge which knows how to balance out government and science and economics and
This
culture.
is this is integral to the appropriate activity that must take place in the deen.
Yeah, that's where the balance is. That's what
Mm-hmm.
deen means. A lot of people don't know that. The
Mm-hmm.
word deen has to do with your social capabilities,
Mm-hmm.
contributing equally
Yes.
the resources of that city. And that's why the city was called Medina. Medina.
Mm-hmm.
That means the place of. It's the place of deen.
Mm-hmm.
Mecca is not the place of deen. Mecca is the
Yes.
place of ritualism,
Yes. Yes.
symbolism.
Symbol. Yes, I
Safa,
see that.
Marwa are two of the symbols of God. Mecca,
Mm-hmm.
no, that's a place. You don't go there to learn your deen. You have to
Mm-hmm.
study the activities taking place in Medina. And Medina is just a template. Medina can be in Bronx, New York,
Yes, of course.
out where you
Yeah.
are. The
Yeah.
dean can be, and
It's
people don't recognize this yet, but they're going to come to find this out, and they're going to be mad at me for
yeah.
saying this. And
Well,
then,
it's no different than Zion, because
yeah,
Zion is where you
exactly.
are. Yeah.
Yeah, the
There you
promised
go.
land. Where's that?
Yeah.
That place
That's
over there where
right.
they're bombing each other into heaven?
No.
No,
No.
that's not.
Not at all.
So it's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing. So even the Hajj, believe it or not, can be made anywhere on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
We're
There you
spending
go.
$4,000 and $5,000 to do it. We're spending our life
Alhamdulillah.
savings to go over there and make the Saudis richer.
Yes.
And there's
Yes.
nothing in the Quran to substantiate our spending our money, our resources, and traveling that distance. They're right there. They
Yes.
can go every
Yes.
year. They go every year.
Yeah.
But
It's
there's
just.
nothing in the Quran. Allah says that Hajj is a duty. It didn't say that Muslims owe
Mm-hmm.
to God.
Yes.
It says that Hajj is a duty that mankind owes to God. So if mankind owes the duty of Hajj to Allah, how come mankind can't go to Hajj?
Mm-hmm. Yes. There we go.
You go
Well,
there and tell him you're not a Muslim and see how far you get into the gate, into
yes.
the pearly gates of Mecca, right?
Okay, you got me dancing around
All right.
fire
So
now, brother.
well, I'm gonna turn the mic over to you in 60 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go on.
See, you have to stoke the fire if you want that
Yes.
heat and that light
Yes.
to
Yes.
become
Yes.
brighter
Got you.
and more
Well.
comfortable. So
Mm-hmm.
there's much information, much science in there's much information, much science in the Quran, and much the science of sociology and human behavior,
Mm-hmm.
how
Mm-hmm.
we're to get together, how that equality. Allah says He created wealth for some people, and He put other people in the straits, and He said He did it to test you.
Mm-hmm.
So not everyone is going to be rich, and not everyone is going to be poor, and some will be in between. We call it, middle class,
Yes.
high class, low class. We give these
Mm-hmm.
crazy names to them, but it's really just the
Mm-hmm.
dynamics operating within human nature to see how you're going to behave,
Yes.
knowing that all of you have to return to your source creator at some point
Yes.
and be judged for what you consciously did to yourself, against yourself, for others, for your children, for your
Mm-hmm.
spouse, for your neighbor. All of
Mm-hmm.
these duties are laid upon us in the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
And Muslims have been twisted and turned in the direction of being so selfish that we think of zakat and all of these things, and we say salat, that's just for Muslims, the Hajj, that's just for Muslims, mine, mine, mine. So they have fooled us.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened starting about 1,200 years ago, just a couple
Yes.
of couple of centuries after the Prophet's passing, where they
Yes.
began to manipulate the language especially after the Muslims entered Persia for conquest. And the
Yes.
Persians' language was so close to the language of Arabic that their scholars, the Persian mullahs, who decided to become Muslims only because they saw a better opportunity to conquer the Arabs by putting on their cloak, right? Yeah,
Yes.
and they did it with the assistance of the pagan Arabs who, although they became Muslims, they did it under duress. When the prophet came marching back into town, 10,000 strong, those pagans said, if I don't become Muslim, they'll either beat me up, kick me out. I won't have a home. I was born here. I was raised here. So they became Muslims, but they were still pagans in their hearts. And Allah tells you that in the Quran. Do not
Yes.
say
Yes.
you believe when faith has not yet entered your hearts. He was talking to those people.
Yes. Yes. Of
Okay.
course.
So yeah, that's a long story for us. We'll get
This is
into
a
that
template. Yeah.
yeah, we'll get into that in future inquiries.
Mm.
So these were people who were not committed to the deen of al-Islam. And I would advise you also to, instead of just saying Islam, which is another trick in their language, to chop off the definite article. In the Quran, it's never Islam when it's speaking about the broader concept of our submission to our source creator. It's always given the definite article al-Islam. I have created for you al-Islam as deen, the Quran says. When you chop off the specificity.
Yes.
What is this? Who is this specifically for? Specificity.
Yes.
What is this? Who is this specifically for?
When and that's what this is for.
Yes. That's what the intellect does. It chops off. It's like the surgeon. Yes, the surgeon has a knife. The surgeon wields a knife.
Yes,
gotcha. And sharp objects, but it's to preserve life, as opposed to the guy who wants to rob your grandmother. His knife is for different purposes.
Yes.
Okay. The butcher has a knife, but it's for making sure that the appropriate parts of the meat become separated from the fat or whatever else people don't want to purchase, right? So knives are used for good and knives are used for bad, and the intellect is actually a knife.
Yes. Yes.
So the word for the intellect, when the intellect is able to couple its efforts with the soul, just like the lub couples its efforts by pushing blood from the heart up to the brain. You see, that's a relationship. That's wife and husband. That's a marriage. That's a union. Lub, that's a union.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So the nafs, that word in the Quran, nafs, that they normally translate as soul, doesn't just mean emotional person. Like we think about, my soul brother, no, that's not what this is. The nafs also includes your personality. It also includes your acumen, how you think. Okay. And I believe that the word knife and knives comes out of the word nafs. You follow that? Because the nafs gave us in order to separate out the clean from the filthy. The higher life, to separate out the clean from the filthy. The higher life from the lower life, etc. So I'm going to turn the mic back over to you. I want to hear more from you.
This is wonderful. You took us from this tiny little cell and then expanded us into all of these possibilities that are included in that pluripotent concept that Allah created with kun fayakun, in the man, in the human, in the woman. You see, this mental men who's supposed to use this mentality. Now, what came to mind that I want to bring up as a response to this is the inverse. You see, because we're just as we're responsible for nurturing, using the kalb to nurture the intellect and the development and the union, the marriage of the intellect with the kalb in each individual human who comes under our right hand, we also have the possibility to stop that. To repress that development of that fitra. The fitra is in each cell, the fitra is in each organ system, and in each individual, the same fitra that is to develop us as a single organism. When it says, well, Israel is my son, he's talking about Bani Israel as my child, you see, as a political union in the Al Torah, so as a single individual. So we're talking about unity here. So if we help to develop this marriage, you see, and we foment it, we stir it up, we stoke the fires that allow it to develop and warm up and become enlightened and become vibrant and filled with this thing that we call life and purpose and relevance, you see, in order to pursue the Qibla of which you spoke, this direction. I don't remember the Arabic words, but I remember the concept, you see. We're responsible for that. That's one of the responsibilities of the Khalifa. But on the other hand, we can also stop it. And that's what the deep state has set itself about to do. Now, it can't stop it completely, but it certainly hinders as much as possible. I'll tell you about an experiment that many people don't know about. I first read about this in a history, the story of civilization by Will Durant several years ago. He spoke of I think it was a German king who conducted an experiment. I think it was maybe about 600 years ago. He prepared a room in his castle. He collected 30 newborns and collected some nurses to take care of them, but he instructed the nurses not to speak to them,
Yes.
not to cuddle them,
Yes.
and and they all died.
They all died. That's right.
They all
Every
died.
single last one of them died.
Now, there's been some hint that this experiment has been repeated, but I can't confirm it in recent years. There's a Japanese doctor who says, well, because of the demands on the mothers and women in our society, is happening to our children, to our newborns. They're not developing because the mothers are not at home enough to care for them, to cuddle them, to talk to them, to speak to them, to touch them. You see, we're dependent upon all these senses. This potential that you say is in us equally depends upon that calb, that feminine.
That's the activator. That's the activating force.
That's an active. Well, it's like an extension of the womb. Extension of the womb. Until that child is capable of standing on their own, and that takes years. This is very, very different from the animal kingdom. Again, that separates us from animals, because we're far more dependent on each other than the animal kingdom is. Although they're not exactly independent. I'm talking about.
But they're born capable enough to start getting up and running around on their own and that kind of thing.
This inverse thing is, I'm bringing you back to this and bringing it up again because it's like the opposition, isn't it?
Yeah,
like the opposition. Yeah. Because what happened when we are opposing the development of this pluripotential in each individual, we're repressing the fitra and we're opposing what Allah has put in us. So that, the end result of that is you get women in the street standing in Baghdad after the bombing and saying, where is the God of Allah? Allah's not responsible for that. We are. You see, we did it. The Muslims allowed it. The Muslims allowed the deep state in their own country and in the deep state's influence in their own country, in the deep state's influence in the West, to murder them en masse.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
No.
So when they throw their hands up like that, that's an expression of ignorance. You see, I know they're exasperated, and I'm not, trying to downplay that suffering at all. I'm trying to define it. for what it is, you see, because what Islam, al-Islam,
Yeah.
Muslims are, let me rephrase that. I'm going to try and be more careful with my words with you, dear brother. You see, what Muslims have failed to do is they failed to express al-Islam because they have not discerned it and entered into the Ummah 1200 years ago.
Yes.
Now,
Please.
I am in the process of several discussions with you and a few other brothers and sisters who are helping me to define what happened. You see, I got into a conversation several years ago with some Sufis back in Malaysia, and I asked them the same question. They admitted, well, Muslims were deviant. They missed the boat somehow. They didn't get their ticket stamped. Something happened, you see, and they had to get off the train. And they didn't have an answer. I asked them, well, what happened? When did this happen? What happened? The Prophet gave us a perfect vessel. Why didn't we fill it? You see. And they couldn't answer. They could answer all the ritual questions. They could answer all the philosophical questions. They could not answer the political question. You see what happened? Because that's where the power is. You see, power is only expressed in unity. I mean, look, the power of that one pluripotent cell that we all began with is expressed in the unity of this pure individual.
Yeah.
There it is. That's the man. Israel is my son. You see? So, and if you read Al Torah, the prophets are always talking about sons and daughters of Jerusalem, of here, there, and the next place. Well, they're referring to ummas at different times of human development. They're not just talking about individuals, they're talking about a complete political entity. So Islam, al-Islam was abandoned, it seems, because of this ritual repression of how shall we, freedom.
Yeah.
You see? And I think...
But look at what it turned into. Freedom.
Yeah, freedom.
The freedom to be dumb.
Yeah, what's happened. And I think we should probably stop there, brother, because that's a good place to leave people in contemplation of this particular discussion. And we'll see what it is that Allah has in mind for us, inshallah, next week.
This is wonderful. I thank you for your time and attention.
Oh, thank you, brother. Thank you for sharing with us. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.